Damn, I forgot the question already.
It was about travel. What's your first, do you remember your first big trip?
Oh yeah, that was to St. Louis.
Okay.
That was my first really big trip anywhere, was to St. Louis. Because I mean, where I was growing up, you know, you didn't go anywhere. I mean, we were neighborhood kids. We stayed in our neighborhood. If you went outside of your neighborhood, you got to be ready to fight. Sean can tell you that. You don't go traveling in somebody else's neighborhood, you know. Now, I could go up on Morton Street because my grandmother lived on Morton Street and Austin was up there. So every little club Austin was in, I could go and hang with them, like Detroit Park. I could hang with the LPs and they wouldn't bother me because they knew Austin and I would be with him. But otherwise, I wouldn't have been going up in the Northwest. You're asking for an ass kicking, sure enough, you get out of your territory. You don't want to do that, but it was good. And Austin was free to come to Northeast because everybody knew me. So he could hang out with me in Northeast and he didn't have anything to worry about. In fact, most of my friends were scared of Austin because Austin belonged to Detroit Park, and Detroit Park had a terrible reputation. You know, they were mean. They did not play around, right? But other than that, everything else was, you know, we didn't travel. Most of the time when I went out of the neighborhood, I would be going up to the northwest, up to my grandmother's. And that would be to go swimming with Austin. And we would go swimming at Banneker. And then we eventually got to where we could go to McKinley Tech and swim in McKinley's pool. I mean, that was really nice. We loved that because McKinley had 3 diving boards. You know, they had 2 lower boards and then they had what they called the high towel. So, you know, you really couldn't swim if you couldn't go off the high towel. You had to be able to jump or dive. You had to go off that high towel before you certified as being able to swim.
Wow.
So we got that hooked up, you know. We learned how to do a few dives back then, you know, jackknife, swan, half twist, and stuff like that. You know. And the lifeguards were good because they would teach you. You know, if they saw you struggling with something, they would come to you and talk to you and help you, teach you how to do things. So we really learned how to swim because before we would go to Banneker, we used to go swim in what they call Beaver Dam. And Beaver Dam was over there off of Kenilworth Avenue. And really it was part of the Anacostia River. And we'd get some cans of beans, an opener, and some hot dogs. And we'd go over there eating raw hot dogs and uncooked beans, you know. But we would swim, you know, you could swim and feces would be in the water. You could see it floating in the water. But we didn't care. We were swimming, we were in the water, you know. So like camping for us, right? That was over there, not too far from the Lily Pond, what we used to call Lily Pond. Now they call it the Aquatic Gardens. But it's right off New York Avenue. We used to walk over there. And that was that. We loved it. Nobody had swimming trunks. Swimming trunks. Well, you swim in your underwear or you swim with nothing, right?
Yeah, my dad tell that story too.
Yeah. But it was fun. I mean, we had a lot of fun growing up. It was nice. But I don't know. There's no new question out there, right?
Well, tell us about St. Louis. Sounds like that was a big trip.
Yeah, St. Louis. I went out there after that year in McKinley. After I did the year in McKinley, then Sam got this research fellowship to go to Washington University in St. Louis. And they asked me if I wanted to go. I had a choice, I could go back to Northeast with Earlene and them, or I could go to St. Louis. So I said, yeah, I'll go to St. Louis. I'm not going back over there, not after what I've experienced with you all. So then the question was, do you want to fly or take the train? And so I told him, I'm not flying, because I didn't know nothing about flying. I didn't know a whole lot about the train, but I said I knew I wasn't gonna fly. So they flew, and I took the train. And they had somebody meet me at the train station. Can't think of his name now, but he was a part of the group of people they met when they first went out to St. Louis. And when he picked me up from the train station, it was 100 degrees. I was ready to get back on the train. I mean, it was 100 degrees, and it was 100 degrees dry heat out there in St. Louis, right? So when we got in the car and we headed toward the house, he was a really nice guy. I can't think of his name. But he was a jazz man. In fact, that's one thing I found out in St. Louis was the adults were into jazz, right? Except my la-de-da aunt. She was into classical music, right? And Sam too. Sam liked classical music too, but on the way to the house from the train station, he had jazz on the radio, and he kept asking me, you know who that is? You know who's playing it? You know this? So finally I told him, I said, look, I'm not a jazz person. I said, I listen to rock and roll, He said, oh man, he said, no, you got to grow up. You can't be listening to rock and roll. And that was my introduction to jazz out there in St. Louis, because everything they did, they played jazz, the adults. And I want to say that was when I first started liking jazz, but that's not really true. I started liking jazz more so when I came back from St. Louis. Even though I listened to the jazz out there in St. Louis, and I listened to classical music because the girl next door that I was interested in, she liked classical music, right? So whenever we were together, it wasn't going to be rock and roll, it was going to be classical music, right? And that's when I got into the Tchaikovskys, the Beethovens, and Wagner and stuff like that. In fact, I was so ignorant, I was calling it Wagner. Because I didn't know that in German, the W was a V. So it was Wagner, But I got to the point where I really liked it. Plus they liked a lot of show tunes, So I started getting into the show music.
Big band.
And then after a while, then the country music, because Midwest, they like country music out there at that time. So I was being exposed to a whole lot of different kinds of music. And I was 18 at the time. And the girl next door, we got along pretty good. She had a sister named Sissy and a brother named Tommy. And I got to know them pretty good. I got to know them because her name was Yvonne, and Yvonne went to high school with me. She went to Beaumont. And I really think she wanted to date. I was advised, no, don't date the girl next door. Don't date the girl next door. That'll be a problem, right? So we just kept it friendly. I mean, we did a little kissing and all of that, but nothing serious, We didn't get too serious out there. But then I met this guy named Les, and Les became my best friend. He and I started a club called the Progressives, and we were the Progs for short. And we had about 12 members, you know. I mean, we were good. We started having dances. We had a dance at the Y, charge people to get in.
Mm.
And everything was going fine until somebody broke into the coat room and stole a couple of leather jackets.
Oh.
And then all the money we made had to go to pay for the leather jackets, right? So we didn't really make anything on that, but the club was nice. In fact, I still have, probably back there somewhere, I used to write poetry, and I wrote a poem for the guys in the club. And I did a line for each guy in the club, you know, what his name was or something like that. I still got that poem back there somewhere. But that was good because I was real popular out there in St. Louis because I was new. I was the new guy in town. Plus I was from DC and I could dance.
Mm.
Plus they weren't familiar with how we talk. And they were kind of, the girls kind of like talking to somebody from DC to talk the way I talk, you know. So I got to be real popular real quick. And they made me president of the little club that we had. You know, I mean, I was experiencing a lot, but I had one experience out there. I think I may have told you all about this, but when I first, I think I was in the 11th grade, and I met this girl named Norma Brown. I thought Norma Brown I thought she appealed to me. She was just nice, you know. And so I hooked up this thing where I was going to take her on a date, right? And she lived in the projects. And you know, Sam and Gwen, the house they had, this 3-story house with a basement, and you know, they were middle class living because Sam and Gwen, when they were out there, they associated mainly with same people like in DC, the doctors, the lawyers, and dentists, and all of this stuff. That's the company. But I know I'm all over the place with this story, but anyway, I'm telling you as I think about stuff before I forget it. Whenever they had a party, everybody came to the party, and that fascinated me because the school teacher came, the dentist came, the trash man came, the mailman came,
Dang.
everybody they knew, or they all associated together. Even some of the people that Sam worked with doing research at the university, they came. And the neighbors came. I mean, they didn't discriminate about who could come to the party. As long as you like jazz and drank liquor, and smoke cigarettes, you could come, right? But I'm gonna get back to Norma. Sam told me, when you go, get you a box of candy and get some flowers. And when you get there, you give that to the mother. So I did that. I got a box of candy and got these flowers, and by then I was driving their car. That's another story. And when I got there and knocked on the door, her mother answered the door and told me she wasn't home.
Mm.
No, her name wasn't Norma, it was Roma, R-O-M-A, Roma Brown. She said, well, Roma's not home. I said, I was so hurt, right? I couldn't believe that this girl from the projects didn't want to go out on a date with me, right? So I gave the candy and the flowers to her mother. And then I got in the car, went back home. That ain't bothered me, right? And then the next week when I saw her in school, she hardly spoke. And before that, we were talking, we were friendly and everything, you know. But then I found out later on that this girl, Wilma, liked me. And Wilma was Roma's friend. And Wilma had told Roma, leave him alone. You know, he's going to be with me. And that's why the story came up that she wasn't home. And then it ended, it went after, and to make it short, I ended up dating Wilma for the last year and a half of high school. And that's who I took to the prom, Wilma. And got to know her, her mother. Wilma and I babysat together for the people who lived next door to her. And it was really nice, man. In fact, it was because of Wilma that I joined the church, you know, because the group that I was with, they went to church. So if you were going to be with the girls, you were going to go to church, right? So I went to church, and one Sunday, this lady was singing Just a Closer Walk. Just a closer walk with Jesus. And she sang it so well, I found myself up out of my seat, going down and joining the church. And next thing you know, I was getting baptized, you know, Reverend Cook. He told me, he said, look, he said, can you swim? I said, yeah, I can swim. He said, well, I'll tell you what, we're going to make this really beautiful. He said, you're a nice size and everything. So when I dip you, I'm going to keep you under the water for a longer time than I usually do, right? He said, and you just lay straight back and you just let me put my hand over your face with the cloth and everything. And I'm going to hold you under while I say some words and blah. So I said, okay. You know, he made an event out of it, right? But finally I came up, you know, and everybody was good with that. They happy, you know, they sang. But I still like that song to today. Just a Closer Walk with Jesus. I like that song, man, especially the way she was singing it. But then I joined what's called the Baptist Young Folks, BYF, Baptist Young Folks Group, you know, church group. And we would go, after church, we would go to this restaurant that was owned by Ike and Tina Turner. It was a restaurant owned by them. And we would go in that restaurant, sit on the stools. Those who had a little money in their pocket would get this shoe shine guy to do their shoes. You know, you get the shoes polished and everything, right? Then you hang out with the girls, and that was pretty nice. Some of the other things we used to do out there when we weren't in school, we would go to parks, go to movies, but we really like going to where they have these little street guys, street vendors who sold barbecue rib sandwiches. And you could get a pig foot sandwich or a pig ear sandwich, right? And we would get all that stuff and we'd be eating and everything. You know what? The sauce that they had out there was so good. Some of the guys would give their ribs up for your bread with the sauce. That's how good that sauce was. They'd give you the ribs, say, here, you can have the ribs, give me your bread, right? And that bread be soaked in that barbecue sauce. And that was one thing. Then we had a White Castle. White Castle was our hamburger place, right? That's where we went for hamburgers. And everything out there, St. Louis was good. It was too short for one thing, but it was interesting that this girl came, one of Sam's friends, a guy named Juju, Juju had a cousin that came from California, girl named Cheryl. I still got the picture of Cheryl. She was pretty to me. God, that girl's pretty. But I think Cheryl was 1 year older than I was. And we started hanging out, and of course, Wilma didn't like that at all. But I told her, I said, well, look, Cheryl is here from California. And my uncle asked me to show her around and make sure she have a good time while she's here. And she's just gonna be here for the summer, right? Wilma still didn't think that was a good idea, but it was okay with me. And I remember this 4th of July, they had a cookout where Sam and Juju decided they're gonna roast the pig. So they dug this pit in the ground and lined the pit with cinder block, right? And then they built a spit, and they went out and got the pig, stuck the thing through the pig, put it on the spit, lit all of that wood and charcoal under it, got the fire hot, and then they roasted that pig for 2 nights, 2 days really, slow roasting them for 2 days. Well, one of those, and you had to take shifts, right? So one of those times, Cheryl and I had the shift, right? And when our shift was over, we went in the house and we were in the living room on the floor. And we were, you know how you do when you get on the floor in the living room. We was just smooching and kissing and touching and everything, right? And I thought we were getting ready to get down. I said, oh, wow, this is going to work out, right? And then a little mouse ran across the floor. She screamed, I jumped up, we ran from the mouse, and we never did get back to smooching and kissing, right? But next thing I know, Cheryl's gone back to California. And she wrote me once. She wrote me once when she got back. I don't know what happened to that letter, but I do know I still have her picture back in there, but my junk. But that was a nice experience. And then I started fooling with the school assistant superintendent's daughter, right? And of course, he wasn't too proud of that, but he knew Sam. See, Sam knew everybody. He got out there, he got to know a whole bunch of people, right? Because he was really the socializer. So that didn't last too long with her. I can't think of her name either. I know her sister's name was Edith. But it wasn't too much happening with her anyway, because Edith would never go away. Whenever I was over there, Edith would be right up in our faces all the time, right? And maybe the father told Edith, you keep an eye on them. But after that, I just sort of settled down and I was with Wilma the rest of the time. And then when it was time for me to get my driver's permit, because it was when Sam's fellowship was up and he was ready to come back to DC, he said, well, Sterling, you need to learn how to drive so you can help me drive back to DC. So I said, okay, didn't bother me. See, I was 19 by then. 18 and a half, close to 19, yeah. So he took me down, got my learner's permit, and he took me to it's a place, a park out there they call Forest Park. And Forest Park is like Rock Creek Park, huge. But in Forest Park, you pass by the stables where they kept those Clydesdales, Budweiser Clydesdales. You could go over there and pet them and watch them groom them and all that stuff. So we used to do that sometimes, right? But when I was taking that driving thing, he took me to the park, parked the car, gave me the keys and told me I'll be back. So while I'm gone, you just learn how to drive around in the park, right? I said, what? He said, yeah, well, see, I knew what he was up to because Juju had this cousin and he was going to go get in the car with her. And they were going to go off and leave me there with the car till they finished doing what they were going to do, right? So while he was gone, I taught myself how to drive. I drove all over that park because I had plenty of time, and nobody was going to be bothering you. And I learned how to do the curves and turn, slow down, back up, do everything, right? So by the time Sam got back, I could drive. So we set up this thing for me to go down and take the test. And when I went down to take the test, I got in the car with the guy and he told me, okay, go around the block. So I drove him around the block. He said, okay, go around this other block. And I went around the other block, came back and he told me, well, pull up right there. I pulled up, he got out. He said, you passed. I said, I didn't park. He said, I said, you passed. So I said, fine, and that was it. I got my little driver's permit, right? And I swear, look, I had a temporary permit at first. And sure enough, I went through a traffic light and that was my first ticket. That policeman pulled me up. When he pulled up, I think in St. Louis at the time, the police had a shotgun that had a thing to keep it on the dashboard. So when he gets in there, the shotgun is right there on this rack next, hooked up to the dashboard. And when I saw that shotgun and he pulled, I started shaking. I said, oh my God, that guy gonna hurt me, right? But he told me, he said, I pulled you over because you went through the traffic light and you really shouldn't be driving by yourself with this permit that you have, right? He said, but I'm gonna give you a warning ticket and don't let me catch you out here again driving without somebody else in the car. Well, that was a lesson for me. I wasn't gonna do that. That was for sure I wasn't gonna do that. But that was part of the driving. So I really learned how to drive. I just kind of taught myself how to drive. I thought I could drive, but one day, because I used to do a lot of work, that's how I kept my pocket change. I would rake leaves for people. See, all these people that Sam and them knew, like a dentist, I used to clean up his office on the weekend. When he was closed down, I'd go over and clean up his office. Then I had people, it was a little like a nursery school. On weekends, I'd go over there and clean up the nursery school, wax the floors, polish and stuff, just cleaning up. And then I had some ladies that I had to rake the leaves for them because they didn't have husbands or anything, right? So I would be raking leaves. Then I had a couple of people who wanted me to do their Venetian blinds. So it started out doing windows. I would wash their windows, right? And they loved that because I would take my time and go into the corner of the window pane and make sure to clean the corner good, so it didn't look clear in the middle and dirty in the corners. So then I started getting referrals. Get him, because he's gonna clean the windows good, right? And then one lady was going on a trip and she had me come over and water her roses while she was gone. And all the time I'm making money. I always had pocket money, right? And then one day, the lady next door, and this was Yvonne's, they had a roomer. She roomed with him. She wasn't related to him. And they wanted me to paint her bedroom. And I'm doing a good job. I was painting, I messed up, man, and got some paint on this dress that she had in the closet. I was painting the closet door and stuff like that, right? The trim. And got some paint on that red dress. Got this damn white paint on that red dress, boy. Which was okay, but Sam and them and all my little pocket change we had to use to get the dress cleaned as best we could, but they could never really get it back to where it was supposed to be. So needless to say, she didn't like me. She didn't like me at all, right? And then one day I can't remember whose car this was. We had a 2-car garage in the back of the house. And I used to go back the car out the garage, right? And I think it was shared garage with the people next door. But somehow or another, backing that car out of there, I scraped the car, the other car. So that was some more of my money that they had to go fix that car. You know, I mean, I couldn't believe that I was getting into all this little dumb stuff. But anyway, I got through that, joined the Baptist young folks, then joined the basketball team, playing basketball. Boy, I'm telling you, I went up for a rebound and came down and hit my chin on the head of the guy who was under me, right? Hit up underneath my chin and shattered this tooth. The whole tooth was just shattered, right? So Pete, well, his name was Peterson. He lived 3 doors from us, 2 doors. He was a dentist. So Sam got him to replace the tooth. So he pulled the tooth. It was shattered. He couldn't save it. So they pulled the tooth, and then he made me a temporary plate, because I had to walk around school waiting for that plate with no tooth up here in my mouth, right? So I had to get all the teeth, and here comes Snags, here come old Snaggletooth and all that stuff. You know, I had to deal with all of that. But when that tooth came, that was good. You know what? From St. Louis to I worked at Deal, I still had that temporary plate. Right here, this tooth right here. Eventually, I got that implant to take care of that. But one time that thing broke. And one of the teachers up at Deal's husband was a dentist. And his office was on 5th Street. Now, we were living at 3rd and Jefferson. His office was on 5th Street. So she told me, well, I'll tell my husband you need some work done, and then you can go over there and he'll take care of it. So I went over there and he fixed that tooth for me. He fixed that plate so I could put it back in. And that was a long time that I had that doggone plate in my mouth, right? But after a while, you know, I got used to it. But I sure did knock that tooth out playing some damn basketball. I can't believe that. But anyway, coming toward when it was time for us to come back, that was when we had the prom and everything, right? And so Les and I decided, he was driving, his father had a Chrysler, a white Chrysler. He used to call it the white tail, right? So he was driving his father's Chrysler, and I had Sam and Gwen's car. And Les took the girl next door's sister. He took Sissy to the prom. And I got Wilma. We going to the prom. But before we go to the prom, we decided we're going to go up to the liquor store. We're going to get this drunk to get us liquor, right? So we had our orange juice. So we gave him a couple of dollars, and he went into the liquor store and got us some vodka. And when we came out, let's start drinking that vodka. Boy, we had a good time at that prom. Boy, I'll tell you, we had a good time. But when I got home from that prom, I had to crawl upstairs. See, in the house with the 3 floors, I had the top floor. That was my room up there. It had its own bathroom and everything, right? And just like on Jefferson Street, you had to go up some steps to get to the front porch. I had to crawl up them damn steps. Well, I'm so glad when I got in, and then had to crawl up to the third floor. On my knee, my head was so bad, everything was turning around and twisting. Oh God, it was horrible. When I got up there and lay down on that bed, I thought that was heaven up there, that bed. And then everything started turning around. Everything started going around and around and around. Next thing I knew, I was in the bathroom, spitting up in the toilet. I mean, I was sick. I mean, I was really sick. But nobody knew because Sam and them had gone to bed, you know, and Bobby and them, they were in bed. And nobody knew. And I said to myself then, I said, well, I'm not doing this no more. You know, I mean, I was sick, man. Plus, and they didn't have central air conditioning. And up on the third floor in the, I used to have to put put a pan of water on the radiator so that it would put moisture in the air because the air was so dry all the way up there, plus that dry heat in St. Louis, right? And I used to always keep a pan of water on the radiator so that would evaporate and put moisture in the air. And I found I got used to it after a while, but at first, just because it felt like every time you breathe, something is cutting them. Everything was just so dry. You know, your throat was dry, your nose was dry, everything was just dry. Until they put that water up on the radiator. But that was it, man. I cried when I left St. Louis because Wilma was leaving. She was going to Bennett College. And I was leaving, coming back here. And we were breaking up, not because we wanted to, but because we had to. We didn't have a choice. And on the way home, and I think we were getting close to Wisconsin. We were coming near Wisconsin, and this record came on the radio. It was called Teardrops. Something about teardrops falling from my eyes and blah, blah, and all of a sudden, tears just flowing, right? But that was a nice long drive, and we got to see a lot of stuff. And when I got back to DC, we tried to communicate for a little while, but that didn't work. Sam used to always tell me, absence makes the heart go fonder for somebody else. Man, that was true. As soon as I got back here, then we stopped writing, and I only heard from her once since then. That's another story. But, and then Yvonne came to DC.
Adam, stop recording because
And I had to
my stuff's getting glitchy here. I
you
don't
know,
know.
I told Teresa who she was and everything. And Teresa told me, well, you know, you got to take her and show her the city. So I took her, showed her the city and everything, and then I haven't seen her since then. I haven't heard from Wilma, but that one time when I heard from Wilma, she called Teresa and I were in the bed. She called 11 o'clock at night. She was living in California. So it was 11 o'clock our time. And when I answered that phone, I don't know how Teresa knew unless I just said, she told me, well, this is Wilma. I said, Wilma Brown? She said, yeah. Teresa said, tell the bitch you married. I said, I never say Teresa didn't curse. She was not one that used a lot of profanity. She said, tell that bitch you married. So I told her.
Stop there, because you're glitching.
She was married. She stayed on the phone for a little while and then hung up, and I haven't heard from her since then. Right. I often wonder what happened to her. She was nice though. She was really nice. But anyway, we got back there from St. Louis. I think I've told you most of what happened. In
Hey,
St.
Dad.
Louis.